Yeah, Brian. If we had Skype problems, I was going to do the phone, and that has worked in the past. So that's always an option.
Okay.
Because I'm kind of a big shot, and I have a Skype account, so I can do that.
You are kind of a big deal, Steve.
Yeah, that's right.
It's true.
Hey, I've got a sign that says I am here somewhere. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Steve, just so you know,
Yes.
I'm drinking coffee out of my mug that Terry bought me that says "The Man, the Myth, the Legend." So just, you're not the only big deal.
Oh, you must have my mug.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, she bought it for me.
All right. Oh, tell Terry I said hi, by the way. Okay. I'll pause and we'll be off. Welcome to this edition of the High Strangeness Factor here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I am your host, Steve Ward. On the High Strangeness Factor, we explore all aspects of the unexplained and the paranormal. In examining the experiences that people report that happen to them. You know what? I just blew that. Okay, I'm going to start again. Sorry about that, Andy. So when Andy edits this, okay, try again. Welcome to this edition of the High Strangeness Factor here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Steve Ward. On the High Strangeness Factor, we explore all aspects of the unexplained and the paranormal. In examining the experiences that people report having, the elements that involve the high strangeness are not automatically rejected. We look for the patterns and underlying connections that bring all of these elements together. And first, I'd like to welcome Zelia Edger back as my co-host. Zelia, thanks for being here tonight.
Well, hey, thank you very much for inviting me on. I'm really happy to be here.
And we just actually had a show, you and I together. Now, you have had a show called Just Another Tinfoil Hat for it's been over a year now, year and a half, or I'm not sure how long it's been. But
for the podcast, I think it was November of 2019 that I started that up.
And that's also corresponds with your YouTube page, is that what you call it?
YouTube channel, I guess, YouTube technically.
Yes. No. Okay, that's better.
Yes.
And you have been posting great YouTube videos for quite some time, actually longer than your show. But now tell us what's changed about Just Another Tinfoil Hat, how people can find it, and what's different in this new format.
So, I have switched up quite a few things with that. I'm going to give it a shot, try posting my podcasts exclusively onto my YouTube channel. So now you can watch out for a new release every week. So it'll be one week will be one of my classic YouTube videos on some sort of weird account or strange phenomena, some theories regarding, pretty much what you are interested in as well, the patterns and parallels between different types of paranormal phenomena. And then the next week will be part 1 of a podcast episode, and then 2 weeks later you get the part 2. So, that's pretty much the new format.
Now people can support you financially with this program you have?
Yes. If anyone's interested, you can get part 2 of every podcast immediately after part 1 if you would consider joining my Patreon account. So you can check that out. It's under the same name, Just Another Tinfoil Hat, or my name, Zelia Edger. And so there's different tiers, I guess they call them, of rewards and things like that for different amounts.
And it's kind of a nice feature. A lot of people are doing that now to help. Obviously, it does take a little bit of money and time to put these things together, and nobody is getting rich or terribly wealthy doing this, except for people that have, I guess, thousands upon thousands of hits on their YouTube channel. And I don't know exactly how that works, but I am proud to say that I am a proud, is it patron supporter? Yes. Okay.
Yep. And thank you very much. And it's fantastic. And, I'm just going to say, even just with this, this first month that I've had that released, I can actually afford to get a subscription to one of those newspaper archives online, which
excellent.
has already helped me extensively with my research. So quick shout out. Thank you to all of my patrons, and you, of course. So yeah.
Well, that's good. And I talk to people that I don't know on the street and brag that I'm a patron of the Just Another Tinfoil Hat, and of course they walk away dumbfounded. But okay, but with no further ado, we've got a great guest. And by the way, this is almost the second anniversary of the High Strangeness Factor, and started in February a couple of years ago. And on my first show was Andy, my regular co-host, and I were on with Brian Seech. And I've known Brian Seech quite a while, great paranormal researcher and investigator. And last year, for the first anniversary, Brian and his lovely wife Terry were on. So this has become kind of a tradition. So, and by the time this airs, and actually a few days from this taping, it will be very close to my second anniversary. So it's be kind of a special show in that way. So, with no further ado, Brian Seech is a researcher and investigator of the unexplained and founder of two research groups, the Center for Unexplained Events, CUE, and the Center for Cryptozoological Studies, CCS. Brian has appeared on Monsters and Mysteries in America, on Destination America, a national cable channel. He was featured on the independent film Mountain Devil, The Search for Frank Peterson, was an extra in the Mothman Prophecies movie, I didn't know that, filmed in Pittsburgh, and has also appeared on various internet radio shows. Brian is a member of the Butler Organization on Research of the Unexplained, BORU, and co-sponsor for the Butler Paranormal Conference. He is a former member and investigator of the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, and the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society, PBS. Brian co-wrote articles for the Creature Chronicles column in the Hancock County Courier in West Virginia from August through November 2013. Brian was also a co-instructor for the first ever cryptozoology class at Eastern Gateway College in Steubenville, Ohio. If you had a sighting or encounter in Pennsylvania, Ohio, or West Virginia, please contact Brian at, one word, Center for Crypto Studies, and we'll repeat that later, Center for Crypto Studies at gmail.com. Brian Seech, welcome to the High Strangeness Factor. Welcome back to the High Strangeness Factor.
Oh, thanks, Steve. And Zelia, thanks for having me on tonight.
Yes, we already met, Zelia and Brian already met off air, so we got to talk a little bit, which is very nice. And in fact, last year at the Butler event, which did not happen for obvious reasons, Zelia was supposed to speak there. So this is really the first time that Brian has had a chance to meet Zelia and vice versa. So now, just to warn you, Brian, at some point I am going to bring up the Mothman Prophecies movie again, because now that's the other thing before we get started. If you want to go back in the archives, you can hear the past shows that I did with Brian, and also if you've listened to the show at all, you know that Zelia and I have done many shows together. So you can go back and check those in the archives. But your time as an extra on the Mothman Prophecies film is so much fun. We won't go into as much detail as we did the last times, but it's definitely worth mentioning again because it's such a really cool story. So since I've known you, Brian, your main thrust has been cryptozoology, but I think would it be fair to say that Bigfoot was your kind of your driving interest?
Yeah, it's always been Bigfoot, or the king crypt has always been Bigfoot, and like we always tease each other that Bigfoot would destroy Mothman in a fight. That's always been a little kind of funny thing with us. People who listen know me and Steve tease each other incessantly, and we have a lot of fun.
I would counter harass Brian and tell him that the only legitimate paranormal researchers are Mothman researchers, and of course, Bigfoot researchers are kind of waiting in the wings to work their way up to the big leagues.
Yeah, it's a fun little side thing that we always do, and when you did the hay rides, which you still do down at the Mothman Festival, every time we come down, we make sure that we get you as the how would you say? What do you call it? You're the
I'm a tour guide, I guess.
you're the tour guide, and we always like to give them grief, and I think the people enjoy it. Who's on our little bus there, or the
I think the
carriage?
proper term is they call me a target.
Sorry.
But apparently you guys enjoyed the harassment enough that you come back every year.
Yeah, we weren't. Of course, they didn't have it this year, and I spoke the year before, and we gave a little bit of grief, as I remember.
Oh yeah. But it's always fun, and of course, the first time that we encountered you guys, I didn't know you really well. I knew some of you kind of from Butler, and I knew you were Bigfoot people. And I saw you lining up for the hayride, and I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. And I won't tell the whole story again because I've told it a million times. But the upshot of it was, I thought there were 6 or 8 of you on there, and it was Bruce Harrington, the guy that runs the Creature Weekend, that told me, Steve, that the whole wagon is full of Bigfoot researchers, and you may not get out of here
geez.
alive. So
You were surrounded.
I was, and I thought, oh no. Well, anyway, so
Yeah, you riled Dave Rupert up a little bit, right?
what's that?
You riled David Rupert up a
Oh
little bit.
yes, well, I didn't know really Dave at all, and of course I was ripping on Bigfoot researchers good-naturedly, but he was looking at me like, is he kidding or is he serious? Do I have to hurt him or am I going to let him off the hook? But Dave's a very chilled out guy, fortunately, so he didn't
Yes, he is.
he
Yes.
didn't attack. But so I'm kind of curious. I know tonight we're going to be talking about winged cryptids, which is kind of a vast subject. When you and I started preparing for the show, we started throwing these different types of reports and entities back and forth. And this is another area that Zelia is very much up on. And I'd forgotten how many different claims of different types of winged creatures there are. What prompted you to become interested in this wing as well as your Bigfoot research?
Well, the Mothman always was one of my second favorite cryptids. I remember in the 70s, reading about this winged creature that kept up with a car at Point Pleasant going 100 miles an hour, and it was just fascinating. I'm like, wow, there's at the time you call it a monster, right? I was a little kid, so I call it a monster. Wow, there's people actually saw this winged monster, and it's always been a passion of mine after Bigfoot, of course, because there's just so many more Bigfoot sightings, and especially up here in Pennsylvania, we have gotten a decent amount of winged cryptid sightings, which I can talk about later. So,
well, is that I know that there've been some kind of in your vicinity, isn't there? Isn't there the Butler one that's kind of connected with Butler? So I wondered if that's one of the things that kind of led you into that area as well.
Yeah, that we have a creature here. Well, we started to get reports, mainly Dan Hagman, which who's in charge of the Butler Conference. He started to receive reports in I think it was March of 2011 and went into 2012 of a creature. They dubbed it the Chicora gargoyle, and those sightings took place in Chicora, Butler County, Pennsylvania. Probably not that far from the conference, maybe 25 miles from the conference or so. Don't quote me because I'm not that good with the directions, but probably about 25 miles from the conference. And basically what they were seeing was a 7 to 8 foot tall, dark, grayish colored creature that had a head that almost looked like kind of like a aerodynamic bike helmet, and it had huge wings that stretched out across the back of its body. And they were dubbing it the Chicora gargoyle. Excuse me, gargoyle.
Brian?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I heard a noise. I thought maybe we lost you for a minute.
Oh no.
Where's a place that I guess if they Google that, they can find it online to get kind of a better image of what it looks like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you would just type in Chicora, Chicora, Pennsylvania, Butler County.
Okay. Butler has had its share of high strangeness. I remember in an old issue of the Flying Saucer Review, which is that great British publication, started in 1955.
Yes.
What was it? This, I don't know, 60s or 80s. I can't remember. But it was a series of it was a Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where there was a landing and aliens were seen right in Butler County.
Yeah, I believe that was in the
Oh.
60s. I
The
forget what
60s.
exact
Okay.
year, but that might have been like 64 or 65. But yeah, and they've actually even had another researcher. Apparently, I guess back in the 70s, they got some kind of a report of a mechanical spider or something to that effect. Just
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
yeah, really weird stuff up there in Butler. And when you come up Zelia in April, you'll be able to hear about a lot of that, and you'll see the kind of the general area where Butler is.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. That one encounter, the humanoids at Butler, wasn't it just it's really, really bizarre where like the faces of the entities almost kind of had a almost Pascagoula type look where their eyes and mouths were almost like just kind of like slits or something. Is that
Yeah,
the
yeah,
one?
yeah,
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Oh man, just eerie. Totally eerie.
Um, What, as you've been going through these, I mean, we just really just touched on this, that there are, when you talked about the mechanical spider, you go through and there are, by the way, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I was playing with my mute here and I wanted to make sure that I didn't
Oh,
screw it
okay.
up.
Yeah. Heard you great.
I didn't want to, just say all kinds of eloquent things and nobody hear them. Um, there's always something like the mechanical spider, like the really oddball cryptid, and they occur in some of these winged sightings. That is just, I mean, it's beyond bizarre. It's strange enough to talk about some of these creatures as real entities and trying to decide what they are. Every once in a while, there's something that just throws us a complete curve. Uh, so as you're going through some of these winged cryptid sightings, is there any patterns you've been picking out, or are there any that you kind of gravitate to that you think might be the most credible? I guess what I'm asking is what intrigues you the most about this particular area?
Well, even like as far as what some of the reports we're getting of what they look like, and I think we have talked about this before. A lot of these winged entity sightings, the creature's legs seem to always be bent backwards, and when they walk, before they take flight, people have said that they almost kind of walk like a chicken. You know, when a chicken walks, how it kind of walks kind of backward. I mean, it walks, but the legs and it kind of walks in kind of like a lanky stride. That's what they're claiming these winged entity sightings when people can actually see them walk and not just fly. And even like the one book that you're in, that I think you gave me, that last book you were in about
Oh,
the. Oh, do you
the
remember what the name
weird
of that
winged
is?
wonders.
Yes, there was also a sighting in there from down in Puerto Rico where there was a guard at a plant, and you probably remember this, that he saw one of these creatures, and first thing he said is it was like walking, and he said it looks like its legs were bent backwards. And uh, here's in Puerto Rico, and then here's in Pennsylvania, several sightings in Pennsylvania. That's what these things, look like and how they walked, and I think that's very interesting.
It would be interesting, the Mothman reports. The Scarberries and the Mallets that first saw this thing in the TNT area, which is that abandoned area north of Point Pleasant. Uh, it was very dark, so they didn't really see its legs per se, but it kind of shuffled as it walked. And there is one other incident. Another thing, Brian. You know how people will dub a lot of these winged creatures. Oh, a Mothman was seen in such and such, but it doesn't really look anything like the
Yeah.
original Mothman. There
Yes.
is one exception to that, and that's in Kent, England, in November of 1963, almost exactly 3 years to the day that the Scarberries and the Mallets were chased down that highway. And it
Mm-hmm.
was some kids were coming back from a dance. They saw a light descend behind some trees, and this thing it looked like the Mothman, about 6, 7 feet tall, bat-like wings. It didn't have a head, or it was kind of uh, uh, sagging down, or down on his chest, or however, very hard to describe. But it shuffled also. Now, it did not have the bright red glowing eyes, which brings to mind, do you find in a lot of these winged cryptid reports that eye shine is discussed, or perhaps that they generate their own light?
Just the reports that we have, there was never any mention of eye shine in any of the reports that we have.
Okay. By the way, Zelia, you can jump in here anytime because I
Well,
know that. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, that's intriguing though about the eye shine because, and it only just occurred to me, do birds naturally have eye shine?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good. I know that several of the bird species can have a reflective. Like if there was a light shined on them, it could reflect the light. But I don't actually know that question. That is a good question to look up, actually.
Because, yeah, I mean, if you have some of these sightings, like the Mothman, one of its most predominant features across the board was definitely the highly reflective eyes. I know in one of the initial cases, they even compare them to like bicycle reflectors.
Right.
But then on the flip side, you may have these other winged cryptids that don't tend to have that very dominant detail of these other ones. And, I'm always on the lookout for, what defines something that's high strangeness versus something that might actually be, more a flesh and blood or natural cryptid. So that's just something as we were discussing this that kind of came up. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Now, there also seems to be and you can agree or disagree, there's a kind of a division. We have the winged type of cryptid that is sort of somewhat man-like or very man-like. The Mothman, the gargoyle you were just talking about, several other ones. The Houston Batman, I should say, showed up in Texas in the 50s. We can talk about them if you want. And then we also have the so-called Thunderbird, which is just a very large bird. Tom Urey saw a large Thunderbird, essentially, during the Mothman sightings. People see what they call pterodactyls, or they look like, prehistoric creatures. So have you examined that at all? Do you see that division in your research?
Well, we've had several. We call them Thunderbirds, obviously. Here in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania has had a rich history of Thunderbird sightings up on the Chestnut Ridge and up towards Erie. I have a friend up there who saw two of them up when he was working at a graveyard, believe it or not. And so yeah, those are bird-like, strictly bird-like. Some say they look like you said pterodactyl. Some like what's called a teratorn, which was an ancient eagle, and they're much different from these humanoid type beings. We just call them winged entities for short. We just lump them into winged entities with like sort of a human-like body, but with big wings. Not bird-like at all.
There's a great chapter in the Mothman Prophecies, chapter 3, The Flutter of Black Wings. And he's kind of building you up for the strange events that occurred in Point Pleasant and the Mothman. And he goes through all these incredible sightings of other winged creatures. And he starts out with one. A man that seemed to be operating some kind of flying device over Coney Island, and supposedly was seen over the skies between 1877 and 1880. So you even get some kind of mechanical contraptions. Oh, here's a question, John Keel. Some of the sightings that were seen, these things, it was like a giant bird, but it gave off a glow. Have you encountered anything like that where any of the entities seem to generate their own light?
No, but the Houston Batman was one of those ones that did. It had sort of a glow around it, and it was more like a humanoid type creature. And also the one that you're very familiar with, obviously, was the Van Meter Visitor, where it had a light up on top of its head.
Yes, that's very interesting. In fact, Zelia and I have attended and spoken at the Van Meter Visitor Festival, which is a great festival. Van Meter is just west of Des Moines, Iowa. And back in 1903, they saw this thing. But Brian, it was essentially it was kind of like a pterodactyl, wasn't it, or just like a big bird?
Yeah, that one I think was more like a big bird, but it did have I believe it had some sort of a light on top of its head.
Yes. In fact, as I recall, Zelia, they thought that it was a burglar on top of the building, didn't they? When they first saw
Yeah.
this light up there?
Yeah, well, initially too, I think that it was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was preceded by a few sightings of just lights over the buildings in town, to the point that, yeah, the bank manager actually opted to sleep in the bank overnight, because he was afraid of burglars. And of course, it was then that he had, I think, one of the closest sightings of the creature. And even, I mean, he, was so afraid that he shot out the windows of the bank, trying to hit this being.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it did have, I think they claimed that it had a single horn on its head or something like that with this
Yes,
light
yes.
attached to it. Yeah. But I know that's probably one of my favorite, weird cryptid accounts, just because too, there was so much, even in the relatively short time that this thing was spotted, there was so much high strangeness. There's the guy who possibly had a missing time encounter after being hit with some sort of strange mist that the beast exuded. The, sightings of lights around the same time. The fact that it vanished into a mine and was never seen again. Very, very strange tale.
I like the way you did that. When I talk about it, sometimes I make the mistake of saying that it exuded a strange gas, and that always gets a
Oof.
good chuckle. So you said mist, and that's a good point, because it gave off the light, and essentially the witness had missing time. Well, you even in some of the entity reports, you'll see the entity that has some kind of a strange light either on its helmet or its chest or whatever, or belt, and we have the missing time
Mhm.
syndrome. Uh, I remember Kevin Nelson, who was one of the authors of the Van Meter Visitor, in his talk suggesting that possibly that the shape didn't matter, just like John Keel's research, that perhaps whatever it was could manifest in different ways, but there are certain elements that are fixed, like the light and perhaps the missing time section.
Mm-hmm.
Is there? Yeah, the Houston Batman was another strange one. Boy, there's just so many here. What are some of the ones that really captured your imagination, Brian? What are some of the ones you find the most fascinating?
Well, obviously, the number one is obviously the Mothman, which you've probably talked about on numerous episodes. I always thought that was the one that really, really caught my attention. But now, recently we've had the, like I said, around here, the Chikora gargoyle. Gargoyle is a hard word to say, okay? And we've had several other sightings. If anyone is interested, if you would just type Chikora gargoyle in Google, look up, you'll see a depiction of you'll see a drawing of the original eyewitness, the creatures that they saw. And I've talked to that gentleman 4 or 5 times about that sighting. And what was really interesting, when that sighting came up in 2011, and I saw the drawing, I got like goosebumps up and down my arm. I says, I've seen this drawing before. So I looked through the S files, and Steve knows what that is. It's our library. That I think he tries to take stuff, Zelia, every time he comes. But anyway, I had an old a Bigfoot newsletter, because that's one of the things we do is we collected old newsletters and news clippings and sighting reports, and I found it, and I found a drawing, and I'm like, this was from 1993 in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I'm like, this is the same thing. The drawing was the same creature in reverse. And if you remember down last year at the Mothman, when I showed that drawing, you remember? Yes. I showed the comparisons, and even like the legs looked like they were bent backwards, and the head was sort of like in a helmeted, like a aerodynamic motors, a bicycle helmet. And from 1993 to 2011. You go from the like the southern part of the state up towards more the northern part of the state, and what would that be? That would be what, 18 years? So, right. Just so interesting. I'm like, like I said, I got goosebumps, and I was like so excited. I mean, I spent probably 40 minutes looking for that, and I remembered kind of where I saw that drawing, and I was able to find it. It was in a gentleman out of I think it was New England, who had a newsletter called the Bigfoot Report. And which is interesting, what's really cool about this, there was an eyewitness's name and a phone number down on the very bottom. And I was like,
oh, wow.
And this was like, and I'm like, you know what? There's no way that this person is probably he's either alive or it's the same phone number. So I actually called and I said, hello, blah, blah, blah. My name is blah, blah. I saw your name and your phone number on an old Bigfoot. She says, oh, yeah, that's me. She says, it was actually like a third party. She goes, it was my son's friend who like had the actual sighting. And the drawing there was the depiction from her son when his friend told him what he had seen. And when I just talked to her, and I'm still friends with her on Facebook, I'm like, what are the odds? Like Steve, like me and you, we collect a lot of this stuff. What are the odds that 1 in a million shot that there's a phone number down and you call it and it's actually the person or somebody to tell you about it? And I was just so excited about that when that happened. I know, me and you, Steve, are geeks like that. So.
Well, yeah, but that's and that's what Zelia and I look for. That's what makes it. You get these individual reports, and you look at the witness, and you try to assess if it's valid or not. But then when you get these patterns over several years and in different areas, and you know that these people aren't colluding and didn't get together and say, hey, we're going to report this same creature and let it lay in wait for a couple decades, and hopefully somebody will find it. So that gives it validity, even though it's very difficult to try and decide the reality level of these things, why they remain hidden, where do they come from. Still, it tends to indicate that there's something real to it. I wanted to mention just briefly, of course, Zelia and I, we attend the Church of John Keel. We are top parishioners, and we even genuflex when we open up the Mothman prophecies. But there was a series of sightings recorded in a book called Haunted Valley. I don't recall the author right off the top of my head, but around World War I, along the Elk River. Now, the Elk River, I think, flows into the Kanawha. The Kanawha is connected to the Ohio. It's all in that same area. They were reporting some kind of a man bird with about a 12-foot wingspan. And they had sort of human heads and so forth, brownish feathers, and they were freaking people out. They kept their kids indoor. And so, that's kind of interesting. I haven't been able to find any corroboration for it. But just a kind of a sideline thing. You know how everybody talks about the Silver Bridge? 13 months after that first sighting that you cited, it collapsed between Gallipolis, Ohio, and Point Pleasant, West Virginia. 46 people lost their lives, and many people thought it was somehow connected to the Mothman, or Mothman was a harbinger. Well, interestingly enough, I'm going to get the year wrong. I think it was 1907 or 03, something like that. There was a bridge across the Elk River that collapsed on the same day, December 15th. Oh, wow. Yes. Huh. Now, there's probably no connection whatsoever, but it is just very creepy that December 15th, two bridge, it was a lot fewer people lost their lives on the Elk River Bridge. But nonetheless, when you find these, synchronicities, I guess, they're just very, very strange.
Mm-hmm. Man, I do have one other strange one. We all know about like the Mothman, how the TNT area was a munitions dump, and how the Mothman was seen around it. We kind of have something similar here. What's in Ohio, actually, and I think Steve, you heard when you probably heard this when Terry and I gave the presentation about that 3 or 4 years ago at Butler. It's called the Freedom Demon.
Yes, and I don't know much about it though.
Yeah, and I believe these sightings took place. I don't have that in front of me, but maybe like 9 years ago, and they took place at a place called the Ravenna Arsenal, which also during World War II, and it served as a munitions dump. Now the National Guard does their trainings there. Now it's still up and running, but it's up and running as a different thing. And there was sightings of a creature, a winged type entity, told to us by a gentleman named Scott Nelson, and he categorized these sightings, and I did not know about these up until maybe like about 5 years ago, when another researcher gave me his connection, and I called him up and we talked about 45 minutes about it, And it's one thing we'd like to do is go up there. There's an actual picture of it. We don't know how legit it is. You know how that is, of one of these creatures in, I believe it was in the sky right above the arsenal. And again, it's kind of typical. It's kind of blurry. It kind of could be something, or it couldn't be, or it could be a bird at a different angle. And just the similarities between that and Point Pleasant are pretty eerie, though, actually.
I wanted to mention again this great chapter in the Mothman Prophecies about all these strange. I like to call it the Phantom Menagerie. There's just some of these things are just so weird, and they don't. Some, you find some parallels, and some just don't fit anything. But they were seeing this large bird, I think, around St. Louis in the 40s, and this one poor guy. I've got to quote this. He had seen it. It was a salesman named Harry Bradford. And he said, I've seen it 3 times in the last 4 days, and that's too much tomfoolery for a man of 50 to take.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Let's see. Zelia, did you have a question at the moment?
Well, to circle back a little bit to that, I just have to say that is like 1 in a million luck that you found that lady's telephone number was exactly the same.
It is.
Like that
it
is.
is.
But the intriguing thing to me is it's like, it's how many years later, and, immediately you mentioned the topic, and just, oh yeah, that. It's amazing how these encounters, they really stick around with people and become, kind of an important part of a person's life, which is just, that's always just so neat to see.
Yeah, this creature seen in 1993, there was 2 couples coming back from the drive-in movie, and they decided to take a shortcut down this. It was a back road, and it was very dusty as they were driving. It's very dusty. This creature was on the left side of the road, and as they, the headlights hit it, it crossed, and I believe 2, possibly 3 steps, and they said that it lifted its wings, and they said it didn't flap. It just lifted its wings and shot straight up. They said there was no sound of a jetpack or anything, no flap. It just lifted its wings and shot straight up. And they were really shaken up. And I guess they came back to a diner. And, when they got to, some of the people were looking at them because they were like shaking. I mean, they didn't go to the police or anything. But some of the lady's son talked to him, talked to the one eyewitness not too long after that. And they said they were really shaken up. They said that this really happened. They saw something that shouldn't exist. And even the Chikora, quote unquote, gargoyle, several eyewitnesses saw it, and they both said the same thing. They said this creature looks like it was from hell, and we wish it would go back. One was a big burly motorcycle driver who never went that way again. He saw it crossing the road. He said, and this is a big, strong guy. If you seen him anywhere, you would not want to mess with him. And he was scared to death. He would not drive that road ever again.
Have you ever chronicled any people that had other experiences after their sighting of the winged creature? What I'm talking about is a lot of people that saw the Mothman experienced an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena in their home. There was a researcher into the Owl Man of Cornwall, England, that said he encountered some kind of a psychic backlash. Have you ever come across anything like that, or is that something that really hasn't shown up?
So far, in just the reports that we've gotten, it hasn't, or the eyewitness has not spoken to us about it. Maybe they're thinking, hey, I don't want to say all this ghost activity after I just saw a giant winged creature. So, I mean, it could be possible, but they have not. None of them have come forward and said that to us anyway.
Right. It's just that sometimes people do have these. Isn't the man bat of Wisconsin? Yes. What can you tell us about that, Zelia?
Yeah, well, the Man Bat of Wisconsin, was first covered by Linda Godfrey in Monsters of Wisconsin, and it's an intriguing case because it was there was a man and I think his 25-year-old son were driving back home around 9 o'clock after band practice, and their car, this strange winged, man bat like creature kind of bum rushed their windshield and then disappeared in some trees. But the amazing thing about this is that apparently for some weeks after the incident, I believe that both witnesses had a mysterious illness in the days that followed, but in the weeks that followed the incident, They claimed that it was like someone kept trying to get in their house. They would hear the doorknobs rattling constantly, and the family dogs too were also acting like something strange was happening. So yeah, that's a very strange one too, because technically you could kind of see how that's almost poltergeist-like in nature.
Hmm.
And, logically we would think that these things are separate. You see the Mothman, you see the man bat, you whatever, and that's it. Then why do these other things seem to follow? Uh, Brian, I haven't really looked into the Owl Man for a long time. Has that been part of your research at this point, or is that something you'll be looking into?
Well, I looked a little bit into that. That took place in Cornwall, England.
Yes.
I think it was 76, where two young girls claimed that they saw this kind of like an owl-like humanoid creature with wings. Um, and it was by a church. I think the church was the Manoir, or however you say
Yeah,
it.
that's right.
Yeah, and um, actually, they said that there was some unconfirmed sightings several years after that also. But there's a little bit of controversy on that. Some people said it was hoaxed by the one gentleman, which I don't have his name right now.
I know who you mean. Doc somebody.
Yeah, you know who? Yeah, and some people said it was just nothing more than, I think it was called uh, an enduring eagle owl or something to that effect.
Oh.
And it might have just been, they might have saw this eagle owl on one of the church steeples, and it came down, and these young girls, not knowing what it is, might have thought it was bigger than it was, because as you know too, even like with some of the Thunderbird sightings, if you see something in the air, you don't have any scale. You might think something's either bigger or smaller than it actually it is, because you don't have, like, say, a tree or a telephone pole for scale to try to, in your mind, try to measure how big it was. So that's why some of the Thunderbird sightings could, maybe, I don't want to say call it into question, but maybe misidentified slightly.
Oh, sure.
If a creature, let's say you see a huge eagle in the air, and you see it at an angle with its wings stretched out, it probably appears even bigger than it is. So scale is always something you have to take in consideration, especially with something in the air.
I think the name was Doc Shields. I read a book
Yes,
years
it was.
ago,
Yes, it was. Yes.
The Owl Man by Jonathan Downes. Now,
Yeah.
Jonathan Downes is a colleague of Nick Redfern and Richard Freeman. And there's a great book. I don't know if you've read Three Men Seeking Monsters by Nick
Yes, I
Redfern.
have that. Yes.
What a fun book. And I was just going through it again today for the show, and I'm going to have to read it again. But John Downes did some research into the Mothman. The Cornwall Mothman, as I recall, he did have kind of a head that looked a little bit like like an owl that could actually see its feet. The Mothman, I think there might have only been one sighting where somebody actually saw its feet. But but anyway, he claimed that when he was deep in the research of the Owlman, that he experienced a psychic backlash. Everything was going wrong in his life. Two pets died in the same week. He had a family member pass on, which may not have been connected, but his house almost burned down. When his buddy Nick Redfern was over there, he went to touch the refrigerator and he got burned. There was something happened to the electrical, wiring.
Wow.
Now again, it may not have been connected, but it's interesting because the night that the three of them congregated there to go off, in Three Men Seeking Monsters, they go off on this great 6 weeks journey where they travel in what they call their own mystery machine, and they investigate all kinds of strange events around the UK. It's just a great story. But that night, all of a sudden they hear this crash. I mean, when they're talking about this Owlman thing and the psychic backlash, they hear this huge crash and the lights go out. The electric fails. But what caused the crash was a bird, a crow, slamming right into the window and smashing it all over the place. So take that for what it's worth. But John Downes was convinced that because he was delving into things that maybe he shouldn't have, there was some kind of a psychic backlash that occurred as a result. And I wonder, with some of the incidents that have happened with Mothman and some of the other ones, I guess I won't completely rule it out. It may be a possibility.
We have a phenomenon kind of going on right now of these flying they're calling them jetpack men.
Yes.
And you've heard of some of those. That kind of harkens back to the Mexican flying humanoids of the believe 2000s, where they were seeing these. Again, it was somewhat controversial. Some people thought they might have just been balloons that look like humanoids or winged people. So there was kind of some controversy, but the jetpack men now kind of remind you of what the Mexican flying humanoids were.
And there's even something that occurred before that. I'm just going to dust off my memory here. They were called the ECALs, the IKALS. I don't know if that rings any bells, but Zelia, do you recall that?
Yeah, that was. I think there was an article in one of the piles that you sent me copies of about that. And I believe,
Review, yes.
Yeah, I believe that Valet may have mentioned that too, or something similar in Passport to Magonia. I recall him saying something about that because they were
go ahead.
These little, almost like dwarf-like beings, very folkloric in South or Central America. I can't remember which one, but they had these like jetpacks. It was almost like they'd literally been modernized, kind of, is how it felt.
Wow, I never heard of that.
That's these go back a decent number of decades too, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just phenomenal. Let me do my intermission here for just a moment so I don't forget. You are listening to the High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I am Steve Ward. With me tonight is my co-host Zelia Edger, and today we are talking to the knowledgeable Brian Seech. And this is the guy that would have been the star of the Mothman Prophecies if they hadn't cut out 2 or 3 hours of the film. But in all seriousness, we're going to get back to the winged cryptid, but just kind of give us a kind of a Reader's Digest version of the of how you got to be an extra in the Mothman Prophecies film. I mean, this really is cool.
Which I'm going to interject real quick and say, so lucky. That is like so super cool.
Oh, it was. I had found out through our local newspaper, the Post Gazette, that wow, Mothman to be filming in Pittsburgh, Mothman movie. So what I started to do then is, and they said that it was Nancy Mosser casting. That's our casting place up here in Pittsburgh. They said, we're looking for extras, blah, blah, blah. So my wife and I both put in for that, actually. And they actually called me. They actually called my wife, but her scene was going to be at night. Mm-hmm. And she didn't want to go up there by herself, so she decided not to do it. But she probably would have been in the movie. But we did. We filmed on the cathedral, the campus there, and I was in the one scene where Keel and John Leake and the other character, the base character, they're walking up the steps. So I'm coming towards the screen, and I'm the guy on the right with the briefcase. And I always tease Steve that they actually cut out the real ending of that movie where I confront the Mothman and I throw the briefcase with the bomb and kill the Mothman, but they cut that part.
See, I thought they cut your romance with Laura Linney.
Shh, don't tell Terry about that.
Well,
that's great.
I always tease Brian and suggest that he wasn't even in it. He had his stunt double carry the briefcase, and and he was in his makeup trailer at the time and so forth.
Well, yeah, about that. I told Steve about that makeup trailer. Literally, me and the other guy who's walking with me, we're standing and there's literally like a trailer there. So I peeked in the window and Richard Gere is sitting there getting his hair blow dried, and it was like a really cold day, and it was windy and it was cold, and so we're me and the other guy are standing there looking in. Richard Gere's he's all warm and getting his. So and then we look and there's like a little barricade, and then there's just people just watching out of curiosity, and I looked at him. I said, "Man, is this what being a movie star's like?" And it was like he started laughing. But it is really cool. If anyone ever gets a shot at being an extra on one of these movies, I mean, do it. It's fun. They pay you. I still have my pay stub, and they feed you. They feed you well. So it's an experience which I would like to do again. But
they gave you directions like don't mix with the stars and so forth.
Oh yeah, don't talk. You weren't allowed to talk to the stars. No cell phones, no cameras. What they do is you go into a room, and then they come in and then they pick certain people. I was actually picked for a scene before that in the park where you remember when he's sitting on the sitting on the bench and looks up. Well, my part wasn't in there because I was all the way across the park walking with me and some other lady. We were walking, so you didn't see us. But as you come out, like he was sitting in that on that concrete chair there, and there's this big boom, and the camera's all the way up top because if you remember in the movie, he looks up and the camera, like it's zooming in on him, and it was really intimidating because you're walking and you see this and this tent and all these people, and it's intimidating. And then I was picked for the other part only because I actually walked up to the front of the room when they were by accident when they were calling out and they pointed at me, "Hey, you!" So it was
did you get wardrobe?
No, you know what though? They gave me a tie and I didn't know how to tie it, so I'm like, so the one lady tied it for me.
Like we couldn't. Yeah, I could tell that knot wasn't quite tied right from the 2.5 miles. And now, did you ever time the amount of time you're actually on screen?
It might have been 2 seconds because we actually saw that when it came out at night. And I took my mom. My mom was with us, and as it came up, I said, "Mom, there and then I was gone. I couldn't even say, "There I am." I'm there. And then boom.
Well,
I was so excited.
I have to tell you, my great missed chance at fame was that when I was in the Navy, I had just reported to my boat that came in from the Mediterranean. I hadn't even served a day on there yet on the sub, and they came down with a camera crew to take photographs for recruiting posters. They weren't going to hire models; they're just going to get the rubby dub sailors to do it. So I got a nice picture of me standing in front of the submarine, and that ended up in a pamphlet. Okay, but several years later, my wife and I went to go visit Groton, New London sub base, and we went into the museum, and up on the wall you see these big blow-ups of these like slides of images, and there's actually a guy that I served with on there. Well, behind him, pretending like he's driving the helmsman and plainsman, is me, but you only see about 1/3 of the back of my head.
Mm-hmm.
So that's as close.
My gosh.
That's as close as I was proudly could tell my wife, "Dear, that's the back of my head protecting us from communists." But anyway,
what's really cool too, Steve, is I was able to get on the couple Monsters and Mysteries in America episodes, and also in a couple documentaries now, two Mountain Devil 1 and 2, and a B, maybe even a C movie called Beasts of Our Fathers about Bigfoot. And it's Fred and I are actually just talking about a couple of real things that happened to us at Beaver Creek, and they came and filmed us. We're in there maybe a minute, 45 seconds to a minute, but we were just talking about some real things that happened down at Beaver Creek, like a rock thrown at us. We heard what almost sounded like a mountain lion down there, and the movie is if you ever catch it, it's called Beasts of Our Fathers.
Okay.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
well, of course, I did, thanks to Seth Breedlove, who runs the Small Town Monsters documentaries. In the sequel to The Mothman of Point Pleasant, the Mothman Legacy, I was one of the talking heads in there, and I actually had a little bit of time, a few different cuts, which was very nice. It's always nice to be in a nice production. I know you've been in several, and when it works well, that's really my only big production. So, but I know you've been in several. But it must be very satisfying to be part of something that is well done.
It is, and you did a fantastic job on there. I mean, I was like, so when you come on, I'm like, "There's Steve." I was excited to see it, and you did a fantastic job. I have hopefully another couple coming out next year. I know one's coming out for sure. It's Monsters and Mutants from Ryan Cavaline, and
Okay.
I'm in that one. And the one I'm really excited also is it's called A Paranormal Life with oh boy, the name is escaping me here
Don't you love it when it'll come back to you? I was just on a show.
Oh, Patricia Coleman. Sorry.
Okay. Good.
She and you, Zelia, you will get to meet her because she's speaking at our conference also, and she's a researcher, and she was with us when and she took a movie clip of the light sphere orb or whatever, and she's going to probably show a little clip of that. It was looked like it was one sphere, and then it split into two. And I know that I'm looking forward to talking to you about that aspect too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do that in just a minute. But first, tell us about Butler and what we hope is going to happen this spring.
Yeah, we hope April 20. I believe it's April 25th. That's that Saturday, and Zelia and Patricia Coleman, and there's several others which we have to totally confirm yet, and we're looking forward to it. And we'll get you more information as normally starts about 11 o'clock, and I think admission's $15. Again, this is all tentative, hopefully pending on our health situation here in Pennsylvania, but I think we should be able to get it going.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I know I was very excited to be invited to Butler last year, and super bummed when it didn't happen. So I'm really, really, thankful that I've been invited back for, yes, hopefully this April.
And
yeah, we hope so. I think it'll go. I think it'll go this time.
And hopefully we'll all get together, not just for the festival, but perhaps we can get together for another Mothman Point Pleasant, West Virginia trip as well.
Yes, and I had talked about several of the things that I wanted to do down there, and it should be fun. I want to do it in the summertime when, off season, off conference,
Now, also, the first time I met Zelia, it was at the Van Meter Visitor Festival, and her talk was on orbs, mysterious light phenomena, and that sort of thing. And Brian, about the same time, you had started another project. I don't know how far along it is because you've got so many irons in the fire, but you were doing some kind of a project that dealt with orbs and light phenomena in the woods. Is that an accurate description?
Yes. Terry and I have started a project that was actually it was last year, and we're calling it LAE, which is Light Anomaly Exploration, and we're looking into what certain factors could cause. We call them light spheres. Okay, we just a different term for us. Some people call them orbs, but we're talking about light spheres that you can actually see.
Yeah.
And the reason we got interested in it is because being our Bigfoot background, we started to talk to people that they've seen these things when they're out there looking for Bigfoot or when they're out there in the woods. So we've actually encountered the phenomenon 2 times up at Livermore. And the one time it was this light sphere is what we call it. It was coming toward us, bobbing up and down, almost like, say, a railroad worker walking down the railroad, taking one of those lanterns and they're swaying back and forth. That's what it looked like. And Patricia was there with us. And we tried to get it on film and we couldn't. We start walking toward it and it just disappeared. And half of our group saw it, the other half didn't because they were down at the bridge. And me, Patricia, and several other researchers walked probably another half mile. So they didn't see what we saw. And then we also saw it back, it was 2 years ago, which she should show that clip at the conference. So it is something that we will talk to you about. And
if you guys want to talk a little bit about it tonight, you can do that too. That would be kind of fun, just for a little part of the show. But first, tell us, you would ask an audience how many people encountered some kind of, I guess, strange light phenomena in the woods, and tell us what the result was.
Yeah, we've done that twice. By it. Yeah, we did it down in Fayette County at one of Fred Saluga's events. I spoke there several years ago on Bigfoot, and I brought that in at the end. I'm like, well, one of the reasons I got interested in it, we're doing this phenomena, studying this phenomena, and how many of you have been out in the woods and have seen these? We call them light spheres, strange lights in the sky or going through the woods. And we must have had about 15, 18 people put their hands up that they've seen it. I only got 1 or 2 actual reports because I have reporting forms there. As Steve knows, we're really big on reporting forms.
Yes.
And we received a couple, and we probably got about 8 to 10 reports now. And other people have just not, they've told us about it, but they haven't gone about to writing an actual report with, we try to get an actual date so we can check atmospheric conditions, so we can check space weather. I think space weather could be another key in how geomagnetic storms, solar flares, how they could interact possibly, and then these things show up. So we're looking at some different things. We're also doing some different things that may help us. Really different things that may help us understand the phenomenon better.
It's good that you're exploring that, Zelia. When you gave that presentation at Van Meter, what was the process? What were you thinking about that led you to give that kind of a presentation and talk about that kind of phenomena?
Boy, well, first I want to say that that's intriguing too, the focus on like the conditions, like you're saying, because that's kind of where I'm at, is I'm wondering what the underlying conditions are for these things to manifest. But my way of thinking, I guess my thought process towards that presentation, it did start with a personal experience. I think it was 2011. My mom and sisters and I all saw these, 4 perfectly spherical, spheres of light just outside of our house, hovering over the crossroads. I've recounted it several times, so I'll try and cover it briefly here. There were these. It was just absolutely perfect. These kind of amber spheres of light. I want to say that they were about maybe 2.5 stories off the ground, and then in true Keelian fashion, they were hovering. I live at an intersection, so they were hovering right over the crossroads, right between all these power lines, and then one by one. One started blinking very rhythmically, and two, I should also mention there were 4 of them, and they were traveling in this perfectly fixed sort of formation, kind of like a parallelogram formation. And one started blinking out rhythmically, and then it blinked faster, and it absolutely vanished. And then the next did the same, and the next, and the next, and they were just gone. And then apparently, too, the best part of the story is that as we were standing there waiting to see what else would happen, one of our neighbors, this boy, comes tearing down the street, and he just runs full tilt into his house. And so we're like, oh, he obviously saw these things too. So, we walk over and knock on the door. We're like, hey, did you happen to see? And he is just really shaken up. You can tell it. He starts shaking his head. He's like, you guys don't understand. I was at the school playground, like some blocks away. This is the second time they've come over. So he saw the same objects or some very similar objects come over once. He figured, okay, whatever, they're gone. But then I guess when they came over the second time, he thought the Martians were probably landing and decided to run home. And yeah, the night it was an overcast night. I want to say I think it was about 10 o'clock, but it was one of those nights where the clouds are so low that it kind of reflects the city lights. So, and it was in March, I want to say. And yeah, so that's kind of what kicked off my interest in orbs. And then the more that I thought about it, my way of thinking on it is that, we see orbs with every different type of paranormal phenomena. And the thing is that usually it's simply defined by the conditions around it. If you see it in a house, suddenly, okay, you've got ghosts. If you see it in the sky, it's related to UFOs. Now, if you see it with Bigfoot, people think you're crazy.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, it's true. And so, I started looking into, okay, so what could possibly account for this? Why are orbs showing up in conjunction with every type of paranormal phenomena? Because, of course, then, too, you have the encounters with ghosts and orbs, or you have the encounters with UFOs and orbs. So it does seem like they kind of follow phenomena. And in my presentation, I have a sort of theory that this is due either to conditions that manifest around the phenomena or conditions that are present when the phenomena manifests, and that orbs are almost some sort of, energetic exhaust in a way. Because, a lot of people just try and explain it right away with ball lightning. And of course, I recount with, ball lightning isn't even that well understood currently. But what it does show is that high levels of energy can manifest in a spherical form. Yeah. And so I think that orbs might just simply be evidence of some sort of difference of energies happening around paranormal phenomena.
And some people, I've read other reports in older magazines too. It's almost as if this energy, whatever, is sentient. It's almost like it has a thought, I know it sounds crazy, but that maybe it's a form of life too, and energy form of life. And again, I don't know. And I know for sure that more, a lot of Bigfoot researchers are finally coming out and saying, you know what, I was out looking for Bigfoot and I saw these lights and I'm hearing it more and more. Actually, if you have seen Expedition Bigfoot, I don't know if you saw that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I've talked to Ronnie LeBlanc and, Steve, you probably met him on Creature Weekend too.
Yes, I did.
Russell Cord and Ronnie LeBlanc. Ronnie LeBlanc saw one in Massachusetts right after he heard something big walking in the woods, and I believe he did see the shadow of a figure. Now he didn't say 100% it was Bigfoot, but then all of a sudden he sees this orb. Russell McCord sees this red, this red orb, and it almost looked like, I think he said almost looked like fire, and then it just like dissipated. So again, he's not saying it's, neither one of them are saying 100% that it's Bigfoot related, but maybe this is a case of the two phenomena just happen to meet at the same time. I don't know. And I do say, I don't know.
Well, James Bobo Fay, I spoke to him at a conference one time. He has seen orbs in conjunction with hunting for Bigfoot. Ron Moorhead, the great Bigfoot researcher out in the Northwest, has seen strange light phenomena in that area in the Sierra Nevadas where they captured the Sierra sounds. It's a there's been all kinds of, well, there was that weird incident on the Skinwalker Ranch where they saw that light and they looked through the night vision goggles and it looked kind of like a tunnel. Something crawled out of it, which was faceless and hairless. If that isn't enough to scare the crap out of you, I don't know what is. But to add, you talked about some of these things possibly having some kind of intelligence. Paul Devereaux, who's written a whole series of books on Earthlights, yes. In one of his books, he coins a term called proto-entities, where the light phenomena is not separated from the entity that seems to be part of it, and that's a whole other segment. So it really is a fascinating subject, and people when I think some people when they hear that a talk is going to be on light phenomena, they think dust orbs, and it couldn't be any further away from that if you tried.
And remember, a lot of orbs, or mostly orbs, like because we do paranormal investigations too. Not a lot of it, but we do, and a lot of these aren't seen until after the picture's taken. We're interested in the ones that are seen with the naked eye or filmed. Those are the ones that we're interested in, not somebody goes into a house or something and sees. I'm not,
Yeah, it's too. There's so much misidentification with that, where you snap the photo, oh, magically you get an orb, condensation, dust. Yeah, there's a lot of that. But no, on the topic of proto-entities too, that almost calls to mind how Keel once suggested that if the eyes glow in a creature, it may be, of the more like ultra-terrestrial type, whereas if they don't, it might simply be, some sort of natural animal. Totally intriguing.
Well, I mean, Steve knows too about, probably you too, Zelia, is Trevor James Constable wrote Sky Creatures.
Oh, yes.
Right? So, I mean, even back then, they saw, maybe these are some kind of entities living in the sky that we don't know about. Well, I mean, again, who knows?
And Zelia, the passage in the Mothman Prophecies where John Keel is in the Chief Cornstalk hunting ground area and he sees those purple lights.
Yes. Yeah, and there was an interview with him where he even called them his purple friends. I just loved that because they would show up so often.
And they actually circled him one time.
Yeah,
that's not in the book, but it's in that talk where they come down and they circled around him. And I don't know. I don't know. I wonder what I would do if a bunch of purple lights surrounded me. If I'd start crying or what.
Then didn't he say that sometime later like whoever either owned the field or was local to the area actually told him that he'd had dogs disappear in that area? And I'm like, Joe, geez.
That's right. The forest. There's an area of the forest that Keel saw that would glow purple. And he asked the local farmer about it. And that's what he said. He said, I don't go near it. He said, I had a dog run into it once and I've never seen him since.
Well, yeah, even on this, in the Skinwalker Ranch, there was the part where he has several dogs and they ran after these blue orbs and he heard these horrible cries. And the next day he comes out and these dogs are like liquefied. There's just a brown, like a mass where these dogs were. And apparently these blue orbs just like fried them. So.
Color out of space, man,
Oh, yes. H.P. Lovecraft. That was the first story I read by H.P. Lovecraft was the Color Out of Space, Late One Night.
I have to watch that movie. Is it any good, the new one out?
I was a little disappointed.
Yeah.
They just seem to, Hollywood, whoever did it, they just seem to overdo things so much when they don't need to,
Yeah.
Okay.
I would agree with that too. Yeah.
My model for a great sort of a horror film is the original Haunting with Claire Bloom and Julie Harris. It
Oh
has
yeah.
virtually no special effects at all, but it will creep you the hell out. And man, if you watch that
Hmm.
alone at night, oh, be prepared. Um, okay, let's swing back a little more to the winged cryptids. So we've just barely scratched the surface. I mean, you've got even the chupacabra, the original reports, not the ones that we were seeing where you've got that flesh and blood hybrid, whatever it is.
Like a
But
coy dog, yeah, yeah.
but even some of those seem to have small, I don't know, rudimentary wings. The
Mhm.
Jersey Devil is supposed to have wings, although I guess it has sort of a snout like a horse, or at least some of the
Yeah, it's
reports.
kind of like a conglomeration of several creatures. Yeah, like a horse and yeah, a bat. Yeah,
So
yeah.
what are some of the areas we haven't covered, or maybe haven't covered enough that you'd like to talk
Oh,
about?
probably one of the biggest ones, and we've talked about this, Steve, is the alleged Chicago Mothman.
Yes, yes. Let's talk about the alleged Chicago Mothman. You know, I did a show not too long ago with Allison Jornlin, who she's done a great deal of footwork
Yes,
in that area,
excellent researcher.
and you still get these reports from northern Indiana and parts of Illinois and the Chicago area of these Mothmen. And I have to, well, let's hear what you say. It doesn't matter. I'm just a humble host. What do you think, Brian?
Well,
See, I threw that back in your lap. You know, if you
yeah,
like,
thanks, buddy.
no problem.
No, one guy I met, Vance Nesbitt. And this was down when I gave my speech. I did talk a little bit about the Chicago Mothman, and um, he said, you know what? He goes, there's about 8,000 cameras in Chicago, and and this is the whole city, okay, on buildings, everything. And he says not really one of them came up with any reasonable facsimile of a real creature. It's when it first happened, I was so excited. I'm like, oh wow, we might have another Point Pleasant type thing here. And then a lot of things just didn't add up. It was what was being seen. It was, and it wasn't originally called the Chicago the Mothman. I forget the Chicago. I kind of forget. There's two or three different versions of the name, and even what it looked like. And then when Allison did her, really good research, how she went to some of these places, and Steve, you know this because she was on your show and you saw her give her speech down at Mothman. It just what the eyewitness said and what allegedly happened, it just couldn't have happened. It didn't work that way.
In many
And
cases, she was there on the scene. And if you make up a story, and you're not, you're just kind of thinking about it, and you don't really map it out, you're going to make mistakes. And there were several that didn't match up. I heard from a couple credible sources that some of the original reports to MUFON came out of the same IP address. I'm
yeah,
talking
that's what Fred Saluga said. He's a
right.
member of MUFON, and he tried looking into it too. And he said, "Where was all the police reports? I mean, if people were seeing, how big Chicago is, the metropolitan area, if so many people, all these people were seeing them. All those sighting reports only went into two different people, maybe three. It doesn't add up, and it's sad because I'm like,
Yeah.
when it came up, I'm like, wow, I was super excited, and then I know some researchers who I should say,
Yes. Well,
yeah, I'm not going to say anything, but I just to say is they try looking into it and how should I say, I don't know how to say this politically correct. Their looking into it was not met with.
yeah,
It
well,
was met with.
it should be welcomed if you've got other researchers that want to come in and confirm what you found, and share sources. That's a problem when you're not sharing sources and say, well, they don't want to talk. Now, there's one thing. Allison did say that there was, I think, one or two of the events where she talked to the witness, and
Mhm.
they may have been credible. I mean, she
Yeah,
hasn't ruled out everything. But on the other
yeah. There
hand,
could be a couple sightings in there that actually did happen. That's the thing. If they weren't outright hoaxes or misinterpretation of birds or whatever whatever that may have happened. But yeah, it's just it's just a shame because, like I said, that was one I really was excited for, and it was a
Yeah,
big letdown.
so was I, and a lot of good people kind of bought into it. I bought into it initially. There wasn't any reason to doubt it. But one of the things that kind of put the cap on, I think, it being kind of dubious is that there are two individuals, and I won't mention who their names are, that were critical of the events and made and expressed that to some of the people that are promoting this. Well, very shortly afterwards, each one of those people, there was an alleged sighting in the town they live in, almost
Oh
as if to
boy.
say, boy, if you were a better researcher, maybe you would have found this first. But that was just, I mean, could have been coincidence, but that's just so suspicious to me that it just reeks of the trickster, but not the cosmic trickster.
Yeah, and it's a shame, and some of them are still in high esteem, I should say, and
Yeah.
some, you know what I'm saying. I'm not going to
Well,
say anymore.
well, we won't go too much into this, but you and I have talked extensively about individuals that have their own self-esteem is pretty high, and maybe that's not really sound self-esteem. It's ego, and there's a lot of that in this field, and it's just too bad that they aren't as humble, Brian, as you,
Mhm.
Zelia, and I, because we are so damn humble that I can't even express it.
All three of us just want to know the truth. We
Well,
just
that's
want to
Yeah.
know
true.
the
That's
truth.
true.
We're just investigators. We don't make money off of this. It's a passion for all of us, and my wife and I have been doing this a long time, and it's the passion. It's the mystery. It keeps us going because we don't make money. Any money we make is barely for expenses, and we'd never get all the money back we put into it. Believe me.
Right.
So it's just a passion, and hopefully maybe giving somebody else a piece of the puzzle.
Are there any other now we can get back to the any wing cryptids you want to, but are there any other passions you have? Any other things maybe you haven't? You've got the orb studies you're getting into. You've always gotten into Bigfoot and other cryptids.
Uh-huh.
Are there any other worlds you want to conquer coming up?
Well, the two things have always interested me is like the time slip phenomena, and the other one, Steve, is, and it could be a big one, is portal research, going to some of these areas. And I've always said, if let's say some of these creatures are coming in, UFOs, whatever, portals coming into a portal area, a window area, pick your you know pick your word for it. I've always thought, and again, I could be 100% wrong. Would there have to be some kind of transference of energy, some kind of energy used? Could we go to a spot that has high energy, or is it just spontaneous and we will never be able to find it? But go to some of these places that maybe have use a magnetometer and you get a high magnetometer reading or a high radiation reading. And I remember Rosemary was doing some of that, and which she was very interested in doing a lot of that. And I don't think enough research is getting put into that, and it's how developing some kind of method to research and to do that.
Well,
And
the
go ahead.
the phenomena certainly does suggest that, and again, the three of us, I think, have all said that there's not one thing that explains these things.
Mm-hmm.
But the way things seem to, like John Keel's window areas, things seem to move in and move out. The implication is that these doors open and close, and even when you get into the David Paulides' missing 411 stuff and some of the truly bizarre disappearances, some of them almost imply that what else could have happened? It's almost like somebody stepped in this window and ended up 15 miles away,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or didn't come back. So yeah, that's your idea of trying to determine enough of what's going on to have the instrumentation that could actually detect these things, perhaps opening and closing. That's a really
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
idea.
And boy, if you could somehow prove that, or get readings in a certain area, maybe these things, like you say, they open and they close. Does some of the space weather have anything to do with that? Could there be a massive solar flare or geomagnetic storm, and in a certain place, boom, they can open up, and boom, they can close again. I mean, again, it's conjecture right now, and it needs to be a lot of study needs to be put into it, and we'll do the best we can and just pass it on down the line, I guess.
Right. Is it controlled by some kind of intelligence, or is it something that is haphazard?
Random. Is it random? Yeah.
Well, I think too, the intriguing thing, kind of to go back to David Paulides' work, is that unfortunately I haven't read any of his books, but I've seen his documentaries and some of his other videos. And on one, he actually overlaid a map of these missing 411 disappearances and places known as spiritual centers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like when Linda Godfrey overlaid the Dogman sightings with the effigy mounds.
Yeah.
It was insane to see that it pretty much lined up. And so, across so many cultures too, you have this belief, like even the ley line belief, or the dragon tracks of ancient China, the different fairy forts of the British Isles. There are these long-held beliefs that there are just these areas where things happen. And it would be amazing if you could nail down somehow what makes these places so unique.
Mm-hmm. I mean, could it be, something in the ground? People say that crystals, especially like quartz crystals, they do retain energy. Could it be there's deep deposits of something else in the ground, and then maybe a space weather event happened, and boom, all these factors combined together, even maybe irregular weather, and could somehow produce some of these things opening. I think it's very interesting, actually.
Well, when you look at David Paulides has that checklist of things, he doesn't just take any disappearance and put it in his book.
Yeah,
It has to meet a certain criteria, and some of them are where dogs don't track. They'll get to a certain point after they get the article of clothing or what have you, and then they stop, almost implying that somebody shot up in the air or dropped out of sight.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things like that. And then just the other day, Zelia and I were talking about all the other parallels with fairy lore and some of these disappearing in boulder fields while picking berries. I
think even
go ahead.
Like certain colors of clothing too.
Yes.
Were considered unlucky. And here you see these disappearances, and I think red is one that you're not supposed to wear. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a good thing I usually wear dull colors, because that keeps me safe, I guess. So, is there any other places you guys would like to go, either one of you, before we start to wind down? Because we have just barely, we've given people kind of a nice overview of some of the winged creature reports, and they are, and each one we've talked about, there's a great deal of depth that we can get into.
Mm-hmm. I think I covered what I had to. Yeah.
Okay, good. Zelia, what about you? Any other questions or any other ideas you'd like to present?
Boy, I mean, the truth is, every single time we do one of these shows, we do really just scratch the surface of all of the mystery of all this stuff. But yeah, no, this was a fantastic conversation. So
yeah, I enjoyed it. It was great.
Well, I was really glad to get the three of us together, and we'll definitely have to do it again. Hopefully, I'll be steaming around for another anniversary, Brian, and I'll have to have you back.
Sure, anytime.
And so again, before I'm going to have Brian to tell us about how he can be contacted and what he's got going on. But first, Zelia, again, you've got the new format for Just Another Tinfoil Hat on your YouTube channel. And I guess I didn't mention that the first show was you and I talking about our paranormal libraries. Which
yes, and thank you again for guesting on that one, because I mean, you were the perfect person to have on about our paranormal libraries, and it was a really fantastic time.
Well, it seems like it's gotten a pretty good response so far. And afterwards, I thought of all the books that I didn't mention.
I know, me
dozens.
too.
Well, I didn't even mention Nick Redfern and Three Men Seeking Monsters and Trevor James Constable, like Brian had mentioned, and all the. It's interesting, Brian, because you start with one individual, and they link to so many other people. And in so many interesting ways, and it's just this is not a boring hobby. Let's put it that way. We're never ever gonna lose interest or fall asleep.
Yeah, you remember when you were at our well, at our old house now. We no longer live there, but how you brought some stuff down for me and I showed you. We were like little kids, man. Oh my! And I'd have Terry go. She'd run upstairs and make me a copy of this, and it was just like, wow, it's like I hit the lottery, you know.
I know it's just and your S files. I mean, you have these endless huge drawers of these obscure newsletters that stuff you're never going to find on Google or online anywhere, and these obscure publications and ones sometimes in some cases ones I've heard about but never was able to get a hold of a copy or even a copy of. So yes, and it's great to share files. I have, fortunately, in my library, I have been able to go through and copy a lot of articles and stuff and send to Zelia because this poor young lady is so young. She hasn't lived through the era of UFO Report and Saga Magazine and True
I love that.
and all that stuff that came up in the 70s.
That was fun, wasn't it, Steve? Growing up reading that stuff. Just that was like so. I was in the 70s. I was like six to 16 or 15. And it was just special time, I wish I would have kept that stuff from then too. I got rid of it, and then when I met my wife, we started recollecting all that stuff. But man, I would have had an even bigger library if I would have kept all that.
Well, I even for a while I've subscribed to any magazine, print magazine I could get a hold of, just obscure stuff like the huge volume called OASP that was supposed to be channeled back in the 1800s. Well, there's a publication for faithists, people that believe that particular philosophy. There's one that was published on Atlantis, just the most obscure. And there were some other great British publications besides the Flying Saucer Review. There was Magonia. By John Rimmer, and 40 and Times back when it used to be a little digest-sized magazine. So it's great to be able to have our libraries and to be able to share them. And I know that some very important people writing books and doing research have come to the S files to borrow stuff.
Yeah, we've borrowed stuff. We've lent out stuff. We've made copies to a lot of different authors here, and you'll see our names. My wife and I's names littered in all of them, and we've even Steve, me and you both wrote in Shaitan's book.
Oh, that's right.
What was it? We both had a chapter. What was it?
I forget what the name of her book.
It was last year. We wrote a chapter in there.
Yeah. See, we're so well published. We can't remember all the names of the books we've been in.
Well, we hope. My wife and I hope to write some here too. We always talk about it, but it's like it's probably my fault. Like Terry says, we should have had 6 or 8 or 10 books out already, but it's never been like important to me. But as I get older, I want to get that information out. So.
Well, so do I. It's kind of like that little bit that will live on. Perhaps one day, Brian, Zelia, and I will have a book that becomes so obscure that it goes to third-party sellers, and it's going for like $300 or $400.
See, now that is the definition of fame there.
Let's see. Boy, I really don't want this to end, but I guess it's about time to wrap it up. Zelia, any parting comments?
Thank you for having me on the show yet again. I know it's been a time since I've been able to guest co-host with you, so this was just super fun. And Brian, it was nice to finally talk with you.
That's great. We did this twice this week, and hopefully
you also.
We'll do it again soon. Yes, it's great. I'm really happy you guys met each other. And Brian, tell us how to get a hold of you and all the stuff that people should know about that you're doing right now.
Yeah, my wife and I have two Facebook pages, Center for Unexplained Events and Center for Cryptozoological Studies. If you do have any kind of event, anything from any kind of cryptids, go to Center for Cryptozoological Studies, and everything else goes to Q, Center for Unexplained Events. And also, if you have any sightings, you could sightings of any unknown animals in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. I always say West Virginia ones will go to Fred Saluga. It's Center for Crypto Studies at gmail.com. You can message me there if you can. Find our Facebook pages.
And we're all going to pray and look to the heavens that Butler will occur this year in April. the Butler
Yes.
Paranormal
Oh, yes.
Weekend. Yes.
We hope so. And I'll bring some drawings and stuff, Zelia, for you to see. So you'll have a good time if it all goes on.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, well, I am, again, fingers crossed, really looking forward to it. So,
Okay. Everybody sit tight. I'm going to do my closeout.
Okay.
Again, thank you, Brian and Zelia, for being here. What a fun time. And I'm really glad we were able to get together. The High Strangeness Factor was created by Steve Ward and Andy Mercer and is copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I want to thank Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson, who, of course, are our fearless leaders here at the network. I also want to thank Andy Mercer in his capacity as my producer for the show, and Brian Zeller, who composed the original theme music for the show. Brian is also my unofficial, unpaid ombudsman, whether I need one or not. I have a new Facebook page called The Phantom Menagerie you can check out if you want. I can be heard on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files weekly as a correspondent. And I am Steve Ward, your humble host here on the High Strangeness Factor, a displaced Yank here on Paranormal UK Radio. Thank you for listening. I will see you all again in a fortnight. Take care.